Hi, my name is Gabriela Cimedevilla, and I am the founder of Don't Be Trash.
Welcome to La Luna TV. This is Good People Globally, where I sit down with people who are doing good in their own part of the world. So today I'm here with Gabby Cimedevilla, which I love your name, by the way.
Thanks.
And we're going to talk a little bit about just the work that you do as far as your own organizations, the organizations that you're a co-founder of, and also just the work that you do to make this planet a little bit better. So, first and foremost, I think just give me sort of an intro of how Don't Be Trash was born.
I just increasingly saw a need for sustainability that was more accessible.
Right.
Because it tends to be a really classist movement. So Don't Be Trash, more so than, the name exclaiming don't litter and reduce your plastic consumption.
Yeah.
More than that, it's like recognize your privilege within the movement and allow the space for other communities, specifically people of color, to really embody sustainability. So that's what I try to do with Don't Be Trash. Make it accessible and make it easy for everyone.
Now, you mentioned accessibility, obviously, and I guess that falls in line with you identifying as an intersectional environmentalist, right?
Yes.
So talk to me about what that is, because I hadn't heard the term before sort of doing research on your work, but I think it's something that a lot of people need to know about, because there is a classism that goes with this kind of stuff.
Unfortunately, you have marginalized groups of people that they don't have access to that. Specifically people who live in like food deserts and they have that one bodega. So they don't have like these sustainable, eco-friendly options. So it's not just about buy this instead of that, and it's not that simple.
Right, exactly. And I am curious to know how you feel about I guess just the fact that this whole thing has, in a sense, become a bit commercialized and, in that respect, watered down.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people have sort of just shrinking this into, let's, use these cute straws instead of plastic, which obviously, and I want to know if you think that there's still value in that, or do you think that we're sort of missing the mark on what it is and what it means to truly be an environmentalist?
So I think that the whole fixation on metal straws and like bamboo cutlery, I think it is a ripple in the pond. And I think that why people really gravitate towards it is just because it's something that they can have an easy involvement with. It's an easy swap, whereas other things are just really large scale.
Right.
Which is why the whole thing about like plastic pollution is really taking off right now, aside from it being a really big concern, and it does have a lot of value and it needs to be addressed. But I think that zero waste is very narrow-minded, or the definition rather is narrow-minded, because it really addresses like plastic when we need to think about our energy consumption, when we need to think about our overall carbon footprint. But those are the harder things to address because that typically falls back into politics.
Do you think that our focus should be more on preventing as opposed to rebuilding? Or do they just kind of go hand in hand, do you think?
So plastic was only developed in the early 20th century, but we've already seen how grave its effect has been on our society, like in our world, and how much of it has just accrued over the years. We could have taken so many preventative measures, because not only does it cost you more, and it's proven that it will cost you more if you do something and then you have to fix it. It's going to cost you more in resources, it's going to cost you more in time, it's going to cost you more in labor. So it's just so much more expensive than if you had taken the proper precautions.
So you mentioned carbon footprint. What do you think are some very small miniature things that people don't realize that they can change and do that would greatly minimize their carbon footprint?
At least if you live like in warmer climates, you don't need to have your car idle. And I think that is kind of my biggest pet peeve when I see people like in the car, like on their phones and like, AC blasting and like gasoline's just pumping out of their car. Like, because it's just such subtle things that a lot of people are just absent-minded towards.
Yeah.
So I think that's one little thing that you can definitely make a huge impact in.
Changing something small it's just something that will only affect them in that very second, and it doesn't matter. But I don't think that people realize that, like, a lot of people do a lot of little things that can
really add up. Yeah, and I love this saying. It's like we don't need one person practicing zero waste correctly, which, I mean, zero waste in itself is a little controversial,
right?
A little problematic, just a little bit. But we need society as a whole, like, practicing it imperfectly.
Absolutely.
So
exactly.
I think there's a lot of truth in that.
Right, totally. And something that you mentioned that I want to touch on a little bit is the fact that people oftentimes don't want to be told what to do, or told that they need something, or told. So how do you navigate that as somebody who is trying to make a difference?
So I think it's like, you know, the saying, you can take a horse to water, but they won't drink water. And it's a matter of, like, listening, communicating, and I think a lot of things that have really helped as well is going to different events, and events where people speak on behalf of what they need. And there are surprisingly a lot of things like that, you know, like town hall meetings, or just like political activists that are like, you know, we work with these communities and they have relayed to us that this is what they need, and networking, but not in the sense of like, I need to work with this business, but rather I need to work with this community.
Right.
And just sort of attending their events and attending what they're hosting and just listening to their needs. I think that goes such a long way.
Tell me a bit about the products that you make.
Yes, so the intention of everything that is Don't Be Trash related is to upcycle. So we have workshops. We did one at Moon Market Miami, which is a really cool new market, and we basically made our own, like, sustainable DIY cleaners, as well as personal hygienic products. And even with where the containers themselves, even those were upcycled. They were like old glass jars, or for the dry shampoo that we used like seasoning, like old seasoning containers. Because pretty much they have like perfect little holes, like huequitos, little holes. So you can just like easily put that on your head, and just really getting resourceful with what you have, which is my favorite part of the movement, because sustainability to me is really a synonym for just being resourceful and using what you have already.
I was privileged enough to attend one of your workshops, and it was just like the demo, it amazed me how easy it was to make something that is so impactful in your everyday.
Yeah.
Talk about why you think that these demos are necessary.
Yeah, so I think that a lot of it comes back to community and just doing things together and with people. And on top of that, a lot of people are kinesthetic learners. They learn by doing and making mistakes, but you are less likely to continue doing something, watching a video, if you keep messing up, because you don't have someone there to tell you, oh, it's actually this way, you know. And it's such an easy, simple thing, but you know, it helps, and that way you just learn better and more effectively. But then as for the products that we make and we sell, those are upcycled jeans. They can be different types of fabric as well, but I love working with denim, just because there's so much nostalgia to denim, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I feel like it's very durable, and it'll just last you a long time, but I sew them myself, and they are all unique pieces.
Yeah.
And I think that's the beauty, instead of just having like the same thing over and over again.
What's something that somebody doesn't realize is super easy to upcycle that they could do right now?
So I think that cotton pads are really wasteful. So you can take any of your old shirts that you don't use, you can cut them up, and so now you have makeup pads to wipe off your makeup. Or you can cut them up so that you can use them to clean instead of using paper towels. You know, things like that. Super simple things. You have like all these resources. You don't need all these other things. My grandmother, she was actually a seamstress her whole life, living in Cuba. And when she came here, I think that was just a big part of her personality, and just being a crafty sort of woman. And when I was little, we would sew these little patches, like sew little patterns together. But I didn't really ever attain that or keep up with that as I got older. But I think that it was definitely with the inception of Don't Be Trash that I told myself, like, this is my blood, like, I can do this. working out of here is cool because before it was my bedroom, it was my grandmother's bedroom. So I think even more so, there's that connection, and I kind of like feel her like energy and her presence when I am working.
Right.
This is one of the zipper bags. So it's a very simple design, and I think that's another cool thing.
Yeah.
A lot of the things that I make tend to be very simple. They're not like really crazy patterns or anything like that. Which is nice because then I can keep the cost low, which means other people have access to it, which is the goal ultimately. But I wanted to make them a little bit more unique. So I have a friend, he is a graphic designer. He's a great friend of mine, and he actually did this up for me. I just told him the concept. I was like, I want it to say reduce, reuse, and I want it to be stacked letters. And he did this for me, and I just thought it was great.
It's perfect, especially with the flower inside. I love that.
Yeah.
So if someone is into getting creative, and they essentially could start really just upcycling their own stuff quite easily, I would say, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you can do it by hand. Truthfully, my practice is very minimalist.
Yeah.
Because I think that's just a part of it, you know, just using what you have kind of thing.
Right.
With the exception of the scissors. They're like really durable and heavy duty, and they just cut so gracefully through fabric. It's such a nice feeling.
I'm sure like cutting denim must be
over and over and over again. And then this I use specifically for cutting through any type of seams. So it really helps, or any type of like really, really small little things that I need to cut.
Right.
And it's been really surprising, and it was really, really cheap. It's a sense of fulfillment and accomplishment. It's like, I did this, and what's cool is like, I did this, which means someone else can do this, which means we can do this. So it's like this moment of like righteousness.
The Food Club project. So tell me how you got involved with being a co-founder with them, and then we'll talk a bit about community gardens.
The co-founders, one of them I've known since middle school. We go back. And
I love that.
yeah, and so we both kind of got into activism, specifically like social media activism around the same time.
Right.
And I think that actually opened the door for a lot of opportunities, because we ended up both getting involved with this national plant-based women of color organization, or rather people of color organization, called Veggie Mijas. So they branched out of New York City, and then chapters just started popping up all over the nation.
Right.
And so we got involved with them, with the Miami chapter specifically. We are in South Florida, so.
Yeah.
And then the organizer for that chapter, her name is Tammy. So we started working with Tammy, and then after months of working together, we were tabling at this event, and this grant writer just comes out of nowhere, and he was like, oh, so why don't you guys just like, you know, start your own garden nonprofit thing?
Right.
And we're like, yeah, why don't we do that? Let's just. And so that really planted the seed, because we had all these ambitions anyways.
Right.
So we really just grew together, Tammy, Jess, and myself.
Right.
And we founded Food Plug Project.
Absolutely. So what are you growing back here?
So currently we have arugula growing. We have bush beans growing, which are kind of similar to black eyed peas, kind of.
Got you.
And then we also have basil, but basil is really demanding and very thirsty. Okay. So that has been a little bit tricky, but they are growing just very slowly. And what's super cool is that at the other co-founders' parents' house specifically, because, you know, I think another thing to acknowledge is that we are all privileged enough where our parents have a yard. Like, we all live in apartments in the city, but they have, like, our parents, they have yards in the suburbs where we can have a space to grow while we look for our own land. So they're growing carrots, cucumbers, cilantro, beets and radishes, and different things. So we have a lot growing collectively, and like their gardens are beautiful and overflowing.
What would you say is a common misconception with growing your own food? Like, what's something that's easier that I think a lot of people deem harder?
Right.
And then also the vice versa of that, like what has actually been a challenge when it comes to it?
Yeah, like people either assume that you have a green thumb or you don't. And it's like, no, it's something that you work towards. And thankfully, I have come to a place where I can like keep a plant alive, and that's a success. So
Exactly. Totally.
But on the flip side, I think the difficult thing that you might encounter would be things like pests. So that would be the most challenging thing.
Right.
But there are a lot of really good resources. There's surprisingly such a big community on social media, which is so advantageous because social media, like, it's shocking how much it's done for me. I used to hate social media, but now I really value it. And
Absolutely.
it's because of that specifically.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much knowledge and so much community on social media.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about community gardens, because I know that that is something that you're working on with a different foundation.
So a lot of the produce that we have in our stores that is commercially sold to us, that comes from like the middle of America, you know, and it comes, and not only is that associated with immense carbon emissions, but it's also associated with runoff because of the amount of fertilizer and just agricultural related chemicals that are pumped into our food just so we can sustain this crazy expectation of eating tomatoes year round. So what I think is really beautiful about community gardens is that it makes it so much easier for people to understand where their food really comes from, because you can see it, you can interact with it, and food is just such a vital part of our existence. Food shapes our culture, food shapes our health, food shapes society, you know, and how we run as a society. So implementing community gardens is really going back and like saying, okay, so we deserve to eat food that is healthy, that is nutritious, and that isn't going to be like $7 because it is a more healthy, like, you know, the non-GMO and organic option. Because community gardens, a lot of them tend to be donation based, which is another really cool thing about them. You can get like this huge box of produce for you and your family for like $5 to $10, and that'll last you a week. And that's actually how we plan on operating once we really get up and running as Food Plug Project and we have our own piece of land.
Right.
So we intend on being sliding scale. So it's like what you can pay, that's fine, because you're going to get food regardless. And and that's just another essential part to community gardens. It's community.
Exactly.
It's like such an emphasis on that, and that's lovely. And I think that people would be so much more connected if they just started a community garden or volunteered at a community garden or supported in any way they could.
Absolutely. I think above all else, aside from like obviously the benefits from it, I think it's really unifying.
It is. It's so unifying because you never really know who's growing your food. So then you have all these issues of labor rights, and like, you know, a lot of the people who grow our food, they tend to be immigrants.
Right.
And because they're immigrants, they tend to be overshadowed and they don't have a voice because they're so scared of like deportation. So it's also a thing of like, you're ensuring that in all the ways your food is grown in the most ethical manner.
Oh, wow. That's so powerful.
Yeah.
In all of the ways. Absolutely. Just to wrap it up, if there's anybody who's watching this who's sort of reluctant or rather just apprehensive about how they can change their lifestyle to fit a more just preventative, I don't know, just be better to the planet. What's one piece of advice or one thing you think that they should just know about how easy it could be?
I think that when we think of sustainability, it's this really broad umbrella, and I think that's why a lot of people are reluctant to jump in, right? But I think that on the flip side, it being so vast in so many ways that you can approach it can also make it easier, because you don't have to start here, you can start here, you know? And whereas the other person would start here, you can start here, and there's so many different ways to go about it. So I think it's a matter of assessing your comfort zone, your comfort levels. And before you like jump into saying, okay, I eat meat every day, but I'm going to be vegan now suddenly, you're setting yourself up for failure. And it's steps. And it's a lot of patience. That's a lot of patience. And I think that what helps is having people rooting for you. Because a lot of people will tear you down before you've even started. Like, you can't do that.
Right.
Why don't you leave that to someone else? It's like everyone has heard that before.
Yeah. There's so much value in surrounding yourself with people who are just in the same wavelength, for sure.
Yeah.
You're so in your purpose. And if you've had this much success this far, I can't wait to see that. Above all else, just the change that you're going to make environmentally. Because you did take the step and you did say, I'm going to actually do it. I'm going to avoid the noise. So congratulations to you.
Thank you.
Shout out to Don't Be Trashed. Shout out to Food Plug Project. You guys are all just really making a huge difference. So yeah.
Thank you.
What can people look out for? What's to come?
Yeah.
Anything you want to shout out?
Yes. So as Don't Be Trash, we're going to have so many more events throughout 2020 and just in the future. We also, of course, will continue to have products available for purchase, and 40% of the product sales benefit Food Plug Project initiatives.
Okay.
So that directly allows us to get more funding for things like land, for things like hosting events at certain places. And the idea is to have free events, or if not free, at least a really low charge, because the whole purpose is to have it to be accessible. We don't want to upcharge people. That's not the goal. The idea is to allow everyone to have access to it.
Absolutely.
So stay tuned for Don't Be Trash. Stay plugged for Food Plug Project. We have a lot to come. We're excited. We have a lot coming up.
Well, thank you for sitting down with me, and
Thank
thank you
you
for watching. I'll see you next time.